Now, if you're on the market to spend a little over 160,000 ringgit for a 3-row, 6 or 7-seater SUV, you would have been pretty much spoilt for choice. You had the Mazda CX-8, the Nissan X-Trail, the Hyundai Santa Fe, and now you even have the PROTON X90. There was actually one name that had existed in this space for quite some time, and after a brief disappearance, it is now back. The Kia Sorento is now here in its latest generation, packing new engines, new technology and new powertrains, plus new interior configurations in order to woo buyers. However, with its price point well above 200,000 ringgit, can the Kia Sorento carve a little space for itself within this segment, or will it be overlooked for slightly more value-conscious rivals? My name is Ayman I. Abdullah. This is Malaysian Motoring. This is our review of the 2023 Kia Sorento. Now, one of the major benefits that the new Sorento has over a lot of its rivals is its looks. Now, the Sorento's biggest market, or one of its biggest markets, is actually North America, which is why this car features a sort of design language that would appeal very much to North American buyers. You have this very bluff front end, which frames a huge tiger nose grille, replete with a little pinch in the middle and the new Kia logo sitting very proud in the center. Flanking those are full LED headlights, replete with LED daytime running lights which double up as indicators. Now, this particular feature Kia calls the tiger's eye line, which, if you look at the image of a tiger's face, does actually make a little bit of sense. Down below, you will find a couple of LED fog lights, as well as functional air breathers here down the side in order to smooth airflow over the front wheels in order to reduce drag. Another obvious way you can tell this was definitely designed for Americans is down here on the side. You have this much more cabin rearward design compared to before, which has this nice long bonnet ahead of it, and again, it makes it look like a more old school, tougher style SUV. Now, down below you will find 19-inch dual tone alloy wheels wrapped in Goodyear Eagle F1 tires, 19 inches as I mentioned earlier, although you can get this in a lower spec with 18-inch alloy wheels. Either way, I do think that they fill the arches quite well, particularly these 19-inch units. Now, you will find a little bit of satin chrome here and even more satin chrome around the windows. And as far as I'm concerned, that does make the Sorento look relatively upmarket. Up here, you will find a set of functional roof rails should you want to put in a roof box. And overall, the Sorento certainly looks very bold and it has a very assertive look on the road. One of the things that I appreciate most of all, or two things actually, is this little bit of satin chrome here, which actually ties into what we've seen from the Kia Carnival, and also the fact that these doors actually cut in underneath the car so that should you go off-roading, because this car is all-wheel drive after all, none of the dirt is going to get up into the scuff plate and therefore dirty the back of your pants. And this, of course, is another angle that I particularly appreciate the Sorento. So for starters, you have these vertical full LED tail lights which look very distinctive at night. You have all of this surface play to make the rear end look a little bit less bulky, and I think it does work really well. I appreciate the Sorento badging that's done very prominently down here. I love the fact that the lower end of the bumper has been given its own very unique treatment, again to disguise the fact that this car does not have visible exhaust pipes. And the best feature in terms of design, I think, back here is the fact that the rear wiper is actually hidden up here so that the rear windscreen looks completely unblemished and untouched. I think it makes for a very clean looking design. Now, one of the things I don't like is the fact that you would expect the boot release to be somewhere here, because after all, there is a little shelf here, but instead this merely houses the reverse camera. Instead, the boot release is actually down here, which is ever so slightly counterintuitive. Now, with the tailgate open, bear in mind this car does come with a hands-free tailgate opening where if you keep the key in your pocket and you stand back here for about 5 seconds, the boot will open automatically. You will find that with the third row up, you do have a relatively limited amount of space back here. It is just about enough to fit this particular bag, but not much else. That said, however, most SUVs like this are used as a 5+2, which means for the most part, these rear seats are going to be folded flat. And if you do that, you will find that there is an absolute expanse of space. If you were to load this all the way up to the second row, you can very easily get enough luggage for 5 people over a long trip. Now, as you can see, the parcel shelf is mounted up here because there is actually nowhere to hide it underneath the boot floor. This parcel shelf, however, is big and long enough for you to fit all the way behind the second row seat, so you can cover this entire area, ensuring that all of your valuables remain secure, safe, and private from prying eyes. Now, inside the Sorento, it certainly feels like an all-new generation of vehicle. This interior feels so much more upmarket, and it certainly looks so much more upmarket than before. It's an interesting mix of rugged design as well as sophisticated little features and so on. And overall, it does make for a very pleasing place to be. So in this slightly higher end model, I've got a digital instrument cluster ahead of me and a standard widescreen infotainment display here. Now this infotainment system, like I said, is standard across all variants. So you all get this nice widescreen display replete with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. But only on the higher end models you get the full digital instrument cluster, which admittedly is among the best in the business, but of course it lacks a sort of sophistication and the kind of customizability that you can expect from, say, a premium vehicle from within this price point. Another thing that's standard in this higher end variant is a Bose audio system, which in this particular vehicle does feel very punchy and very crisp, and it is a pretty pleasing audio setup to have. Among other things that make this interior rather nice to sit in is that everything falls very easily to hand. I have lots of actual buttons here for my HVAC controls. I have a wireless charger down there. I even got a drive mode selector here, and I have even more buttons all the way down here. I also have a very large center armrest. There's lots of cup holders. All of the materials here all feel very plush and soft touch, and they feel like they're the sort of thing that will last quite a lifetime. The other thing I appreciate is the fact that the steering wheel in front of me again is very logically laid out. All the buttons are exactly where I expect them to be. Everything feels very pleasing to use, and overall it is a nice place to be. In terms of connectivity, like I said, I do get wired Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. I get a couple of USBs up front here just for charging and one just for the Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. I do get that wireless charger like I mentioned earlier, and of course in the rear there are even more USB ports. Up front, you get a couple of electric leather seats, which again in this higher end model comes replete with these Boss switches on the side of the front seat, again to ensure that you have maximum customizability and usability up front. And of course, these switches does help make it a lot easier, to make life more comfortable for people in the second row. Now, life in this second row is certainly very pleasant. With this seat set up in my driving position and this seat pushed as far back as it will go, as you can see, I have absolutely acres of knee room, and I have a pretty decent amount of headroom too. I also get a couple of aircon vents here, although I don't have any individual controls, and I have a 12-volt socket down here as well as a USB-A port should I need to charge anything up. Now, again, the vehicle that I have here is a 6-seater, which means in the middle here, instead of a 5th seat, I do have a pass-through, which means access to the third row is even easier. That said, however, the Sorento does come with a one-touch tumble feature, accessible via buttons on the side of these seats, which move them out of the way, again, in order to aid ingress into the third row. Now, if I were to move this seat a little bit further forward so that you can see, you can tell that with the way these seats are set up, sitting quite high, it does mean that even if I have to get quite close to the seat in front of me, I still have very good under-thigh support. These individual armrests are also very comfortable to use. I have my own cup holder here, and on the top variants, I even have a sun blind here, which would be very good should you have children sat in ISOFIX mounted seats back here. And of course, as an adult, if I want to snooze, I can also lean this seat quite a ways back should I want to get even more comfortable, particularly over a longer journey. Now, as far as I'm concerned, the second row of the Kia Sorento is a very impressive place to be. The third row, however, not so much. Like a lot of other SUVs in this segment, and although the Sorento is among the biggest out there, the space in the third row should be limited only to smaller adults or children. Large size or full size adults will not be comfortable back there for a drive that exceeds any more than about 45 minutes to an hour, largely owing to the fact that the seats themselves are mounted quite low and therefore they don't get a lot of support. That said, any passengers that find themselves back there will appreciate the fact that there are two USB ports, one on either side, as well as a dedicated fan switch control to control the two rear aircon vents back there to ensure that third row passengers remain very comfortable. The third row, however, does not come with ISOFIX mounts, which means if you have children that require child seats, they should be sat in the second row instead. Now, with all of the necessary bits covered, we ought to get back in the driver's seat because again, the Sorento has yet another surprise up its sleeve. Now, the Sorento has always been available in Malaysia with two engines, normally one large naturally aspirated petrol motor and one slightly smaller turbocharged diesel mill, and that is much the same with this model. So the vehicle I'm driving right now is actually the 2.5 litre SmartStream G naturally aspirated petrol engine, which produces a decent amount of power and a decent amount of torque, with power going to all four wheels in this variant through a 6-speed automatic gearbox. Now, for some of you, especially those who have test driven the Kia Carnival, may ask, why bother with the petrol? The diesel engines from Kia are known for being very refined, very smooth, while still being very fuel efficient and quite punchy. And to some extent, you are quite right, because those mills are very good at what they do. However, having spent about a week in this petrol-powered Sorento, I do understand the appeal somewhat. So for starters, when you're moving about like I am now, in doing, urban speeds and thereabouts, this engine is remarkably smooth. You get very little in terms of intrusion from vibration or noise, and as a result, it means that progress is completed very smoothly and without much intrusion. And of course, when you do put your foot down, you are not exactly rewarded, but you get a noise that isn't exactly unpleasant from the engine room. And as a result, it does mean that when you are driving intently, the experience is not quite as negative as it might be in, say, the diesel-powered model. This engine, as I said earlier, is best suited for town driving, because if you are driving on the motorway, you will notice the fact that the torque in this car, for example, is produced at a rather high RPM, which means when you are trying to overtake, you will notice you have to put your foot down and you'll have to drop a couple of gears in order to complete the maneuver smoothly. That said, however, when you do have to do that, at the very least, the gearbox is responsive and fast enough, which means that you're not left sort of wandering and ambling about as you wait for the gearbox to respond to your input. That's certainly a positive thing, no matter how you spin it. And of course, when you are at motorway speed, you will appreciate the fact that the steering in this car weights up in a very natural fashion. And as a result, it gives you a great degree of confidence, aided further by this car's all-wheel drive system. And of course, regardless of whether you're on the motorway or when you're stuck in town traffic, you will appreciate that this car does come as standard with level 2 semi-autonomy. So it doesn't matter where in the Sorento range you buy into, you will get things like radar-guided cruise control, blind spot monitoring, rear cross traffic alert, lane keep assist, and lane departure warning. Although on these top spec models, you will also get things like Kia's sort of blind spot camera system, where when you indicate left or right, it will show you a feed in the instrument cluster of your blind spot. That obviously you don't get on the lower end models, because the lower end models don't come with a digital instrument cluster. The top end models also get a heads up display, full color at that, which even shows you things like, for example, if there is a vehicle in your blind spot, which means that information comes at you faster than it would via simply the little indicators on the wing mirrors. Now, overall, the Kia Sorento is clearly a very positive experience because you're very comfortable, it's quite corseting, there's plenty of space, and it drives in a relatively positive way. But not everything is fine and dandy in the land of the Sorento. The one key area where I feel that the Sorento does let the side down somewhat is in terms of NVH. Now, when I drove the Kia Carnival, I remarked at how well it maintained itself even at very high highway speeds in terms of road noise and wind noise intrusion. Now, in the Sorento's case, while wind noise is somewhat well suppressed, largely down to the double panel or double glazed windows available on this car, the unfortunate thing is road noise is quite obvious. Now, I'm not sure if that is down to the choice of Eagle F1 tires from Goodyear, or if it's perhaps that this car lacks the sort of insulation we'd expect within the wheel wells. As a result, it does mean that driving at speeds in excess of 110 kilometers an hour will invite quite a bit of noise into the cabin, which does make things a little bit less serene in here. Now, if you were to compare this car to its natural rivals, like the Peugeot 5008 and the Mazda CX-8, both of those cars enjoy much better high-speed refinement. Furthermore, the Peugeot has another ace up its sleeve. Its smaller 1.6-litre turbocharged petrol engine does mean that in town it consumes a hell of a lot less fuel than this. This 2.5-litre petrol engine, while very smooth and very quiet, has been struggling to return anything less than 11.5 litres per 100 kilometers in the week or so I've had with it. But because of its enormous fuel tank, it does mean that it will still do about 650 kilometers from tank to tank, which means you can tour in this, but I can only imagine that driving it every day through town traffic and so on will reveal an even worse fuel economy figure. So, what does that mean for the Sorento? Well, as I mentioned earlier, one of this car's trump cards is its looks and the other being its safety credentials. And as far as I'm concerned, if you're looking for a large 3-row SUV to cart your family around in, particularly if you need more than 2 ISOFIX mounts, because as it turns out, there are ISOFIX mounts in the 3rd row, the Kia Sorento is quite difficult to beat. It offers more space, more practicality, and thanks to Burma's, it means that you can buy these cars with a degree of confidence that you wouldn't be able to get in some of this car's rivals. That said, however, if you're looking for a vehicle that's slightly better to drive and perhaps a little bit more refined, then perhaps you should consider the Mazda CX-8, particularly in diesel guise, because that does offer a little bit in terms of driver enjoyment, a little bit more in terms of refinement, and a lot more in terms of fuel economy. And of course, if you want something that is even better suited to town driving, then please consider the Peugeot 5008. That 1.6-litre turbocharged engine is a multi-award winner for a reason. And no doubt you will be at a loss if you don't try that car out for yourself first. But if you are drawn into the Kia Sorento's very handsome looks, its very unique interior design, and incredible amounts of space both for people and things, then I can't really dissuade you no matter what I say. And frankly, the amount of time I spent in the Sorento does reveal that this is actually a very likable car indeed. If I had a need for something this large, I would most certainly take a look at the Sorento because it is certainly a vehicle that I appreciate walking up to every day. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, with the bulletproof reliability and dependability of Burma's after sales, it does mean that this is a very difficult package to beat. But in any case, it's been our review of the 2023 Kia Sorento. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, hit the little bell icon to notify every time we make a new upload. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. All the links are in the description below. Thank you so much for watching. We will catch you in the next one. Thank you for getting us past 12,000 subscribers, and we look forward to catching you in the next video. Take care, stay safe, and jangan bodoh.